Good afternoon. Happy Friday. I'm Shannon Millsaps, Operations Manager at Thrive Regional Partnership in Chattanooga. I'm joined by Cate Irvin, the Public Engagement and Policy Coordinator for the Chattanooga Department of Transportation. Cate, thank you for taking a few minutes for me this afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk about a pilot program that the city launched roughly a week ago that explores some ways to use shared public spaces like streets and sidewalks to help support economic recovery in the wake of this pandemic. So first off, can you just explain a little bit about Sprouts?
Sure. So Sprouts is sort of the umbrella title. So the idea is it's streets as places, which is a pretty common kind of current thinking about kind of how we can rethink about our streets as not just spaces for vehicular traffic, but also as spaces and places themselves for folks to use. And so with that kind of in mind, we have been reimagining how we can use the public right-of-way, so sidewalks, parking lanes, and then the actual travel lanes of the roadway for restaurants and retail spaces to sort of expand their footprints and also expand their capacities during this difficult time. And so if you'd like, I can kind of go through the three types of programs that we have with Sprouts.
That would be great.
Kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive.
Absolutely.
The idea behind Sprouts is we sort of were pulling together things that have been happening a little bit piecemeal already in the city, putting it under one program, one application, and then kind of expanding it. So back on March 23rd, we launched temporary loading zones. And so basically as restaurants were forced to close for dine-in service, a lot more of them were switching to curbside pickup and delivery options. And so they needed spaces for folks to be able to pull in, wait for their orders, where they'd be there only briefly and then leave. And we didn't want them having to pay for a parking space while waiting for their food. So we set up a kind of temporary loading zone across the downtown area of Chattanooga so folks could have these loading zones for the delivery and pickup options. Under Sprouts, we've expanded that so that it's no longer just within a specific zone of the city. Any business now can apply to have their curbside parking spaces turned into temporary loading zones. So for example, like if you're in St. Elmo, you may have a 2-hour parking zone in front of you, and you don't necessarily want someone parked there for 2 hours if you're trying to do pickup and curbside delivery options. And so instead you can turn that into a temp loading zone for your business. The second option are these curb lane pedestrian zones. And so with these, oftentimes we're now seeing businesses having folks have to kind of line up down the sidewalk to wait to get into a business because of the limited capacities. So, we already saw that at a number of businesses before a pandemic, when, you're trying to go out to brunch and there might be a large group of people and you have to wait. But now that we're also having to practice safe social distancing and keeping 6 feet between people, it made the sidewalk kind of experience a little more complicated. And so for businesses that are experiencing kind of longer lines down the sidewalk, they can apply to have a curb lane turned into a pedestrian zone. And so either they can direct folks to line up through the curb lane, or they can have folks line up down the sidewalk and have pedestrian traffic redirected into the curb lane to allow for that social distancing spacing. And then our final option is what we call the outdoor expansion zone. And so this allows businesses to actually expand their footprints into the public right-of-way, whether that is the sidewalk, the curb lane, or the actual travel lanes of the roadway, and set up things like tables and chairs, or if you're a boutique, maybe you want to set up like clothing racks out there when the weather is nice, so that you can really expand your business fully into the right-of-way. And so for businesses struggling with things like a 50% capacity, now you can expand further and increase that capacity a lot more than you had the option to before. And so we're really hoping that will at least help businesses, with some of their recovery, and every table really counts right now for these restaurants. And so we're trying to find as many ways as possible to get more folks there. And also it helps increase the visibility of the businesses. If they've got people out on the streets and the sidewalks, it makes it easier for folks passing by to say, oh, they're open. I can go there now. But we're also, trying to make sure to enforce CDC and federal guidelines as to how to operate your businesses, and really encourage that these are opportunities for businesses to expand capacity, but it's not opportunities for large social gatherings or kind of special events.
And being 1 week in, what sort of feedback are you already hearing maybe from restaurants, retail, and or community members?
Sure. So unfortunately, there are still a number of kind of steps to get through to be able to actually get into the public right of way. On the DOT side, we're really just trying to streamline it and get the applications processed in a very short turnaround time. Typically, applications for things like an outdoor expansion zone would take between 30 and 90 days. We're aiming to go for maybe 1 to 2 weeks at the most in the turnaround time. We are a lean department, so we do what we can. But it's still got a lot of steps to go in terms of for the businesses. And then on top of that, there are always issues with regards to expanding into the right of way for things like alcohol sales and that sort of thing. So we are trying to help businesses navigate as many of these issues or questions as they emerge, and trying to keep the process as fast as possible. And I think for us, the most issues we've encountered are things that are just outside of our control. We can process applications as fast as possible, but that doesn't mean that the things that kind of have to happen beyond the DOT will happen in the same expediency.
Did you explore some best practices from other cities? Were there some specific maybe examples that helped to inform Chattanooga's program?
Yeah, so unfortunately, NACTO, which is the National Association for City Transportation Officials, just came out with a sort of preliminary best practices yesterday. So we definitely were in the sort of early wave of folks. But we did look to cities like Tampa, Jersey City, Toronto, to try to learn kind of what else is happening, what is working well, and we sort of pulled ideas from all of those cities. One of the things we do encounter is, a lot of these cities are much larger than Chattanooga and have a much different resource base to pull from. And so we've had to tailor a lot of these programs and kind of pair them back to what is feasible for us at this moment. And I would encourage, to think that this is a pilot. So we are launching something quickly in a lean and mean sort of way of like, let's get it out there. Let's see what works. Let's see what doesn't work. And then let's revisit it and see how we can change it, how we can improve it. And then let's see what other cities are doing and how we can kind of pull from those best practices as they start coming out. I've only just now had time to start going through some of the best practices that they released yesterday. And NACTO had a webinar at 1 o'clock today, actually, about this exact topic. So it's something that is currently being learned across the country. And we have a lot we can learn from European countries because they've been dealing with this longer and they're a little bit further along in the recovery now. And so we're trying to learn as much as we can from every other city out there that is doing any of this type of work.
I think we also may see some folks leaning towards those European models when you think about dining al fresco at all, for dining in these open spaces. This work really relies on, to your point, collaboration and communication and flexibility across multiple sectors. This is government, it requires business, it requires community members. Talk a little bit about how that process has come together for you in the city in launching this initial sort of 30-day pilot.
Sure. So one of the benefits that we have as CDOT is that we have been kind of in charge of issuing the special event permits for quite some time for any events that happen in the public right of way. And so what we've really been able to do is sort of streamline and tailor that existing process to kind of match this program. And so through that process, we already had a special event committee that has representatives from across city departments. And so what we can do is sort of tap into that special event committee as we are issuing these, making sure that each department is made aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it. We can get feedback from them. And we already have these existing relationships and kind of collaborations where if necessary, we can send a quick text and say, hey, I really need you to look at this. We're a small city, and so we have some of those relationships that we've been building for a number of years, and we've been able to really tap into that to make this an expedited process.
I love that. With Thrive, collaboration and leveraging relationships for the greater good is what we're about. And what I'm hearing from you is that temporarily shutting down streets for sporting events, for farmers markets, for music and arts festivals is common for Chattanooga. And so why not in a pandemic?
Yeah, really what we've been able to do is sort of take what was an existing permitting process, try to abbreviate the timelines, and really rethink, okay, they're not events, and we can't advertise them or really think about them as events. These are kind of similar processes for different results. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have the wheel, let's just try to use it so that we can make this happen quickly. And then if there are things that need to change, or if we're able to get, additional funding to expand or change the program, then we can kind of look into what we can do to improve it.
I think that's wonderful. Is there anything else that maybe I haven't asked or that you would like to add?
Sure. I mean, I would definitely recommend any business that is even tangentially, thinking about stuff like this to just apply. What we end up doing, and it is time consuming, but we take each application kind of on its individual context. And so it's a case by case basis to determine exactly what is most suitable for the business in its geographic context. And so someone may apply and say, we want to close the whole road and expand all the way across. And that may not be feasible in every situation. And so in that case, we may look at, okay, where are you located? Or maybe we can't shut down all of Main Street, but we can give you this space and we can kind of work with you and we see how that goes for a week and then give us your feedback. So I think government is not always the most comfortable with pilot programs. It's a lot of experiment, and occasionally things don't work out the way you think they will, and you have to kind of try again, and I think it's important to be willing to do that, to be willing to try something, find out what is working, find out what isn't working, and then be willing to relaunch and kind of change as you go. And I think we're given some opportunities to really rethink how our streets and public right-of-ways function during this time, but also as we recover. And I think it's an opportunity to really reimagine what our streets can be. And I think if we can really be open to change and to sometimes slightly uncomfortable changes with regards to launching programs that aren't perfect and maybe didn't have the same amount of time that we would normally put into making sure every T is crossed and I is dotted, but instead saying, okay, people need help now. We need to launch something now, and maybe in a week it'll look a little different.
I really appreciate you taking some time, and I think this conversation will be beneficial for a lot of other communities who are considering similar programs. I will put your email address up here. Cate, you graciously agreed that if anyone has any questions, that they can reach out to you directly. Thank you for that. And thank you for this conversation.
Anytime. I'm available, and I'm excited to see what other cities come up with, and I'm excited to learn from other folks. And that way we can improve Sprouts and hopefully expand it over time.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.